Hello everybody, this is Jason Smith and I'm going to talk about something that has been coming up with me in a little discussion with my good friend John Brown. And one of the cool things about John Brown is that he's a thinker and he elicits a lot of questions and comments and, how do I say this? There's a challenging intellectual delight in talking with him. So, John and I were talking a little bit about the concept that nothing is wrong. And I want to take that to a next step. I want to take that to a step of how to function in a world where nothing is wrong. So, this is how I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to start right here with this. This is called the swirl. Okay? This would be called the swirl of life. So on this planet, it's pretty hard to argue that we don't have some swirl, some problems, some challenges, some activities that need to be done. For instance, right now I need to breathe. If I don't breathe, the organism will die. I need to eat, I need to drink water, I want shelter, right? There's other imperatives to breed, to propagate the species. So I call a lot of this life just biological imperative. Right? And we have, layers of that. We have a survival mechanisms deep in us. We have the 4 different types of brains that have evolved through time. There's fight, there's flight responses. There's tribal responses, right? We tribe up. All of this is the swirl of life to ultimately keep going, to propagate the organism, right? Whether you believe in, like evolution or not, it's pretty self-evident that tribally, biologically, we're imperatively in a swirl of life. We're in the life thing. In fact, if you just back out and watch the life cycle of animals, a calf is born, or maybe say a lion is born, let's use a different out in the wild. It grows up with its mother in a little tribe, then it goes out and hunts, finds a mate, it mates, and then it eventually dies. So that's the swirl, that's the life cycle. Now humans have added, I would say, an immense amount of complexity to that, meaning and love and all this kind of stuff, and I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but I am going to say that there's this swirl. That we're in it. We're in the same thing. Our parents found love, got together, hopefully, had us, and we're kind of doing the same thing. I've gotten married, I've had kids, and then they'll kind of probably do the same thing, and then they'll do the same thing, and they'll do the same thing. No different from flies. Flies mate, have babies, live, eat, die, fly baby, fly baby, fly baby, lions, every animal, swirl of life. Swirl of life. Very self-evident. Hard to argue against because it's just happening here, right? So in this swirl, right, there is a basic right and wrong. So life, right, would be right in terms of the propagation of life, and anything that stops that life or the propagation, maybe say death, right, would be wrong. Okay. So when you play the game of life, you're agreeing to these rules. I mean, you really don't have any choice. You're there. You're in it, right? You can argue and stop breathing, but then you're going to die. It's okay. Now, why did I just say it's okay? Because nothing is wrong. Nothing can be wrong because that's created. This cycle, even the thought of wrong is not wrong. See, like death is wrong here. Me not eating is wrong. In the imperative biological swirl of the life that we're existing in, yes. But it's also created, so it can't be wrong. We're all going to die anyways, so death can't be wrong. What exists is. What truly exists is. So to argue with it, to say it shouldn't exist, is kind of like lunacy. Like we get into a trap of absolute lunacy. We're just so confused. John and I use the example of rape. Rape shouldn't exist. Well, It does. So who are you to say that a reality doesn't exist? That's like me to say this blanket just shouldn't exist. Just shouldn't. Boy, I'm crazy because it does. Like, that's just crazy to say something is different than it is. That doesn't mean it's right in the swirl of life. But on the broader spectrum, on the bigger spectrum of what created this, it's not wrong. So, what do we do with this? And this is the mechanic, okay? This is the technology, right? You take care of this, you got to take care of your basics, right? You got to go to the bathroom, you got to breathe, and then you dwell over here, and you move from that position. I'm going to explain all this. So what does that mean? That very specifically means that you find space. So you get away from that, and this is how you do that. You sit alone, quiet, with no interruptions. It's a type of prayer, or maybe you might want to call it meditation. And what you're doing is quieting this. You say yes, yes to that. Yes, I got to take the groceries in, and I get to go get the groceries. Yes, I got to pick up the kid from school. Yes, my wife needs this. Yes, my grandfather's sick. Yes, 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 yes. You see it all, but you let it go. This is a very specific and achievable state. I can teach you. You can get to the state of space. Now let me describe in words what that is. Whatever created, we drew this big line right out here, this creator that created the swirl, that is this universe, right, is out here, is bigger than the thing it created. And in fact, these lines wouldn't even be here, right? It's not outward, it's all around it. So God is out here, and in the center is this little universe. And obviously it's not a little universe, it's a very big universe from our point of view. But, you know, who are we? We're little, so, you know, like we look giant to ants, right? So there's the universe out here. When you tie into the outside, and humans have been doing it for millennia. They've been doing it for millennia. Right? They've gone into meditative, contemplative, quiet, non-distracted states. So the skill, the specific skill that you can conjure and practice and get good at is to separate yourself from that life, which is a sense of peace, of quiet, of aloneness. Many people have achieved it through prayer. Many people have achieved it through meditation. Those are usually, you know, masculine ways of doing it. There are sacred dances where people dance and move into such a rhythm that they lose that and go into another space. There are various medicines you can take that disassociate yourself from this and give you space. There are breathing techniques. There's a breathing technique called holotropic breath, if you've ever heard of it, where you breathe in a certain way for a certain while and it releases your brain chemicals to separate from that and to, again, to merge with God, so to speak, right? And then, let's see, danger can do it. Near-death experiences, high levels of I don't want to say stress, but adventure, right? Very extreme sports people have discovered something. There's been a lot of studies done that the people in extreme sports, who are doing some really crazy stuff, jumping off buildings and everything, are able to, in the depth of the swirl, find an outside connection to God. So the self-evident piece here is that the human body mind, the element, is consistently concerned with the swirl of life. You can see that, but it seems that there's always this pull to something more, right? And you can look at it in any way you want. There's, you could just say that's just God created the earth and I want to go back to him in heaven. You can look at it that way. You can look at it more expansive. You can look at it smaller. It doesn't matter. But what I want you to get here is to see this pull, right? This pull to that, to the bigger, right? We as humans seem to be drawn to that, right? As much as this is what's going on, this biological imperative swirl of life, we don't seem content with that. And so if you stand back and you metagame that and you look at it, it's pretty obvious that there's something more going on by the nature of our desire for something more outside of that simple experience. And I'm suggesting, and in my experience in many different realms of prayer and meditation and all sorts of life experiences that have given me this sense of out here. And when you're out here, right, where are you? Let's be really clear, right? We're in, right? I'm just going to use this word, but let's hope you get it. The mind of God. The thing that created it, you're touching it. You're becoming part of it, right? And a lot of the fun is to bring something from that back into this life, right? Smuggle it back, as we call it, to smuggle some information from God back and help on two levels. One is this biological imperative. Can we help the biological imperative make life better, right? Can we get cleaner air? Can we get better water? Can we get more food? Can we have better relationships? Can we just do that? And yes, the imperative of God can come in individually and give you information that can guide the biological imperative of swirl of life. But this is something interesting that I've discovered, and I'm not alone in this, but I've discovered it on my own. But later have found other people that have discovered the same thing. In this space, this is a mechanic where you get alone and quiet, something, this is going to sound vague, but stick with me, arises. Something arises. And that something is an urge to do something. In my experience, this is what I like to call purpose. There is an urge to do something in the biological imperative. It's undeniable. There's nothing wrong or right about it. You got to do it. There's right and wrong within it. Food good, starvation bad. I got it. Love good, rape bad. Very clear. But out here in purpose, when nothing is wrong, you have access to something bigger. And I call that bigger, and I want to be very careful about that term. I want to be really super careful about that term because I'm suggesting it's better than this. It's not better, it's just more expansive. It's just something different, and it connects to this creator, this mind of God, if you want to call it that, that permeates everything already. And so when you connect to that, I'm calling it bigger, but it has an urge to do, which is what I call purpose. Like, you have purpose in here, no doubt, right? But if you meditatively find it through the mechanic and technology of separation and space creating, something will arise. Something will arise. And that will be an urge to do something. And it can be anything. Like, it could be paint. It could be write novels. It could be garden. It could be anything. It could be go on a retreat. It could be read a book. I mean, it can be moment to moment. It can be big in the sense that you might start a business helping, sick rape victims. You might, or a nonprofit, let's put it that way. Or you might be urged to have a specific spiritual conversation with your wife or your child. This is what I call purpose. And purpose is really in this now moment. Right? A lot of the swirl of the biology of life is caught up in the past and the future. This is a swirl of, will I have food tomorrow? Or, I got hurt yesterday, and what am I going to do about it? And that's part of the biological life. It's the way it is. But when you come out here into the mind of God has a few characteristics that you can discover. I'm going to list those for you. Again, I want to clarify that these are human words I'm putting on it, so they're as useful as humans can be to put a word on something infinite, right? Which is pretty useless, really, if you think about it. If something's infinite, how can I put any word on it? That would constrict it down, and that would ruin it. So inherently, we really are at odds trying to put words on it. But we do it anyway so that we can just come to understand it and maybe use those words to lead to the mechanical experience of going in and experiencing. Because that's all you really can do, is go experience it. But these words will kind of help you, I believe. Hopefully they'll help more than hurt. Selfless. So when you enter the mind of God, your sense of individual self, let's say the individual Jason, melts away. It goes into something bigger. This is a very specific, identifiable, and repeatable experience that you can have. The sense of self of Jason goes away. The next one is timeless. Time seems to melt away. It seems to appear as an illusion that all things happen at once. Again, something you have to kind of experience, but again, the words will give you a sense of it, that there's this timelessness up to the whole thing. It all melts. Effortlessness. Everything just flows. It goes. So the mind of God is just springing everything into being. It does not take, when you're in here, there is toil. Consider the story of, in the Bible, of Adam and Eve being kicked out of the garden. And by the sweat of your labor, the toil, you're going to have to work. That is the biological imperative in the swirl of existing duality here. There's labor to be done. From the outside, that labor seems to dissolve into an effortless functioning. Things just happen. Again, you can access that state, and it's really an incredible state. But it's hard to explain how effortless things become. And the final one that I use, selfless, timeless, effortless, is richness. Okay? All of life becomes super rich. I mean, every piece of it just becomes beautifully nuanced and detailed. and more alive. I remember reading a few near-death experiences of people who'd kind of gone outside and come back. That was their expression of it. And one of the big things they say is that once you expand into God over and over again, for some reason, there's a lot of details from those books I've read, but one of them was the incredible richness. Like, I think we all can agree that we only see a fraction of the light spectrum, and so that there's, infinite varieties of things, of richness of life. Okay, so that's just the kind of some words of what this kind of feels like when you can get into that empty space, right? But we're here, right? Let's not forget that we're in the swirl, right? I suspect when you die, you'll go back to this. That's my guess, right? When you die, you'll come out of the swirl and go back out. Or maybe you'll go into afterlives and swirl inside here for thousands of lives, progressing. You could do that. I think ultimately, though, you would kind of come back to the mind of God, the creator of the whole thing. When you do this, I'm going to suggest again that something arises, an urge to do, and that is what we're going to call purpose. Moment by moment purpose. Now, let me end it with this. Why do this? This is my belief. I think we're from God. This is my belief, right? This is the creator. This is the creation. I believe the creation always wants to go home. I think there's just, you can't not want to go back to the expansion. I call it that return to home, right? You know it in a lot of literature and a lot of spiritual books. One of the core ones that I think you'll understand is the concept of the Garden of Eden, right? The garden is what? The symbolism of something, of just things working, right? And then the wrong, right? The fall, right? The punishment. I think that's short-sighted to look at it as a punishment, to look at it as anything other than just this experience. This is an experience, right? And as much as you can have a lot of fun in this experience, and you can gamify it, and you can kick ass and do real well in there, right? You go make a lot of money and do real super big and or you could just have a great family and have kids who have grandchildren, and you can be a patriarch, and you can just own a piece of land and just love your life and die peacefully. You can gamify this and do real well with it. You can. And I think the degree to which you reach out beyond yourself back into this is that you can improve that life. I really do. I think you can live an amazing life by reaching outside yourself or inside yourself. Because God's everywhere. I know a lot of spiritual traditions that say it's all in, and I'm fine with that, or it's all out. There's usefulness in looking at it both ways. The in has some usefulness because it's then permeates you. But I think why this is attractive to some, maybe not all, is that we always want to return home because we recognize that this is essentially not us, right? It's not us. It is, we're here, right? But remember I said nothing is wrong, but the nothing is wrong is out here. The wrong is in here. And so we're like, okay, but nothing is wrong. So why don't I go back to where nothing is wrong? And that's why I think we're pulled to that, right? And I think the ultimate, this is my belief, I'm going to throw this on, that we can swirl in our ultimate multiple lives, if you want to call it that, reincarnation or heaven and hells and eternal progression. We can do that for as long as we want. I have a feeling, it's my belief, that at some point that may get boring, and when it does, we'll make a break for it and go back out into infinite consciousness. my thoughts. Useful or not, I don't know. Okay, that is the piece about the swirl, the nothing, the technology to get to this state and to bring it back in and to do something with it and to live a better life.